Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank, WCCS, AM 1160 and FM 101.1. He is Bob Pollock, joining us on the telephone today. But there is a line open for you at 479-1160. If you have a question for Bob, call 479-1160, and we'll pass it along to him. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, in the past, you and I have talked about taking a look up into the trees before the leaves go down to identify those limbs that need to be taken down before the winter comes, the dead ones, and the reason we want to take them down. Could you spend a couple of moments talking about that?
Sure. Well, usually when there are leaves on the tree, it's easier to see which ones are living and which ones are dead and which ones might be possibly or partially alive. You might have the tips of branches some dieback on that, but there still might be some leaves farther back in on the branch. But it's easier to kind of look up in there, assess that, see if there are, and usually there's a dead branch here or there that just naturally happens over time, either through, when trees get stressed, or if trees get really a lot of leaves and they get really thick and dense. And sometimes that can happen because of over pruning, because you get too many branches in there. Some trees tend to get more branches than they really need, and so they can get very dense, and so it gets very dark inside the canopy of the tree. And then what happens is when those branches that are inside there that don't get enough light and aren't able to function and use the sun to make energy, those branches will die. Uh-huh. So periodically, it's good to take a look, get in there, and then anything that is dead, get that out of there. And really, dead branches we can remove anytime throughout the year, pretty much whenever we see them.
But it's much easier to see them, of course, when the leaves are on the trees. Now, there is a proper way to get rid of a tree branch that is dead, and we want to make sure we do that correctly, too.
Yeah, it's much better if you go in there and cut it off than if a storm takes it down. And that's the other thing, just kind of keeping track of that so that if a storm comes by or just heavy winds can break or snap those branches. And different tree species, of course, have different thicknesses and hardnesses of the wood. Some are softer wood and easier to be snapped or broken. And so if there's any chance that those might fall and damage a person or possessions, then it's good to just get those out of there and keep up with that versus waiting until you have multiple ones in there that are really could cause some damage later on.
Yeah, going to make it a job.
And that can cause damage to other parts of the tree, too. I mean, you can have some big limbs that die, and those really need taken care of. Little limbs, a lot of that will oftentimes kind of take care of itself. Sometimes those will snap off pretty nicely, that the tree will grow new wood over that, where that snapped off, and it'll be okay. Other times it'll leave a stub there, a jagged stub. That then becomes a point for decay to occur. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing we're trying to prevent. And by going in there, cutting those off flush, leaving the branch bark ridge, there's a little swelling. It's usually pretty evident on most tree species at the base of where a limb is attached to a larger branch, where it flares out a little bit. It's a little bit swollen, and so you want to leave that swollen or flared area on there, cut the branch off, because the structure and the cells that are in there that grow over that cut surface need that kind of ridge there. Mm-hmm. To do that, if you cut it very flush with the tree, then you remove that, and it's much more difficult for that tree to grow that wound closed before the effects of weather can get in there, especially the rain and then freezing, thawing cycles. All that can then contribute to starting to get some decay in there, and then that starts a process we'd it's going to shorten the life of the tree in the long run.
So do it on the limb side of the knuckle, not on the trunk side of the knuckle.
Correct.
All right, then. Here's another question for you. Nasty-looking shrub. You want to get rid of it. It's the fall of the year. Do you want to take that shrub out now and replace it with something prettier so that it's growing through the winter season or trying to become established through the winter season? Or do you want to just wait until the spring and put the new one in then?
Actually, you can do either, whatever works best for your schedule and for appearance. If you want to get something, fall for most things is a good time, to plant. And with the plants that are potted plants, you can pretty much pop those out of the pot, put them in the ground. You need to check the roots on that root ball that's in that pot. Make sure they're not what we call pot bound, where you've got all those roots circling around the inside of the container. Those need to be cut off so that the roots are growing outward. Any of those roots that run around in circles, once you plant them in the ground, will continue to do that. And that will shorten the life of the plant. They'll usually end up girdling themselves, and the plant is just not going to establish well and be long-lived in most cases. So trimming those roots off is important when planting. But you can still do that, and this time of year is a nice time of year to do that. Mm-hmm. Of course, the days are getting shorter, the temperatures are moderating, so we don't have that higher stress level that we do during the summer months. And we usually have more ample rainfall during this period of time also that makes it easier to get plants established. So, yes, now's a good time if it works and fits your schedule to do it. If you don't get to it, then the next time frame would be to early spring. You can go in and remove that other plant, get things ready to go, and then and you can go to your local nursery or garden center and pick up a new plant or plants to fit in that spot.
Here's another question that goes along with that. When you're choosing that new shrub, and I know it'll vary from plant to plant, if you're taking out a shrub that is 5 feet high, say, is it better for you to replace with something that is much younger and smaller and put up with a couple of seasons when it's not the ideal size for you, waiting for it to grow into that? Or is it better to just get one that's going to be the approximate size that you want that plant to be and then manage it from there? Which one, I guess the better question is, which one has a better chance of survival, the smaller one that's going to grow there or the larger one that you want to sort of maintain that size?
They can just about have an equal chance, small versus big. A lot of it comes down to how you care for it. Once you get it, have it planted, and how well the site is for that plant to grow. Probably one of the bigger differences is going to be the price points. It costs more to grow that plant larger, so when the nursery does that, they need to get more money out of that plant because they had to take care of it longer and grow it longer. So a lot of it can come down to what your budget is for putting those in. But, in a lot of cases, especially with all the pot-grown material these days, those, whether they're small or bigger, they're still can establish well.
Mm-hmm. All right, there you go. He's Bob Pollock from the Extension Service joining us this morning here on Indiana in the Morning. Leaves are going to be coming down soon, and folks are going to be wanting to get those raked up here in Indiana Borough. They bring the sweeper along and they sweep them up. White Township uses the recycling bags, the biodegradable bags. For those who don't have either of those services available to them, they're going to wonder, what do I do with these leaves? And I know we've talked in the past about chopping them up and composting them in some way. I've noticed the other day that the Amish have already started raking them down into the ditches and start burning them, which stinks up the whole neighborhood. What do we do with our leaves, Mr. Robert?
Well, if you've got a place that, if you don't have those services, or if you don't have a way to haul them, say, down to the county recycling center and drop them off there, because they do receive trimmings and lawn clippings and leaves as well, then if you can and have space to compost them, that would be the kind of the best option to do, rather than raking them to the ditch and burning them.
Mm-hmm.
And you then create mulching material that you can then reuse in your own yard too.
Yeah.
It's another advantage of being able to compost those.
That's why I always chop mine up. I figure if I chop up the leaves right there on the lawn and just let the tiny little bits of leaf left, that sort of like is a head start on decomposition.
It is, yeah. The smaller those pieces are, the quicker they're going to break down versus a big full leaf. So yes, if you have a mulching mower, and if you can mow often enough, and depending on the trees and how many leaves there are, you may be able to just mulch a lot of that in place, right on the yard.
Mm-hmm.
And then any excess, if you have, even if you can still shred it, and then use that as a mulch in your beds, that will work.
All right. And burning them does not, putting them on your garden and burning them does not add to the nutrient value at all, right?
It still will add some nutrients. Some of those are going to get broken down in that burning process, but usually even in ashes, there will be some nutrients, especially like potassium can be in there, and there'll be some other trace items as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, there you go. He's Bob Pollock. Thank you, sir.
You are welcome.
Have a
lovely day.
We'll see you.
All right, you too.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
this is Doug Varner. What's going on?